Welcome to the podcast, where something is amiss, something is a mess, and we'll discuss some things MS, multiple sclerosis. This podcast is meant to tell the stories of those living day to day with MS, from before they were diagnosed, getting that diagnosis, the aftermath, and where they are today in their journey with multiple sclerosis. And now, let's get on with the show. Welcome to Some Things MS. And welcome to another episode of Some Things MS, a podcast I started, it's just me as we, a few months back to talk about my story and to tell stories of others who are living with MS. And then also folks who are supporting us through research and through caregiving and through the MS Society and Bike MS, which we'll talk about here in a minute. And I'm excited to welcome Nicole Odell. Is that right?
Yep.
All of a sudden that didn't sound right to me. Lord. Anyway, welcome.
Just like the beer.
Yeah, just like the beer. Yep. I love that. They've got the hops logo, right? Is that the Odell's one? Yeah. Welcome to the podcast, Nicole.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Bobby. Thanks for inviting me on.
You bet. Yeah. So let's jump in and just tell us a little bit about yourself outside of MS to start with. Just who you are, where you are, what you do.
Okay. So right now there's a helicopter outside my window. And I don't know if you
I see. I'm keeping tabs just in case there's an emergency going on and I need to come, rescue you.
For that, I do live near a hospital. That's a mile away. So sometimes those fight for life go over.
Yeah.
But anyway, my name is Nicole Odell. Right now, I am a PhD student at NC State University, and I'm studying Parks, Recreation, and Tourism Management. I just finished up my second year, be jumping into my third year. So I'm kind of in a career transition point right now. We can look at my past life. Actually, prior to going back to school, I did work for the National MS Society, and I worked on some of the walk events here in Southern Colorado, and the Muckfest event in Denver. But like going way, way back, I'm from Florida originally. Okay. And then I did some, my first round of graduate school was in Illinois. So I spent about 6 years in the Champaign-Urbana area. And you can see Fiona jumping in.
I see a little friend jumping in to join us. I love that.
Yeah. So Florida, and then some time in Illinois, and then I moved out to Colorado, and I've been in Colorado for 20 years doing a variety of things. My original background is in chemistry. So I have a bachelor's and master's degree in chemistry. I worked for a semiconductor manufacturer here in town in Colorado Springs. Got laid off from that, and I got into endurance sports. And so then I started coaching people full time and doing that. And then I needed a life change a few years ago. So I went back to school to look at physical activity in the built environment, like thinking how we can create spaces for people to naturally be more active. So if you're in an environment that's conducive to walking someplace or biking someplace, not necessarily for because you're training, but just because it's easy to get to the store or you're going to a friend's house, then let's have environments that make it safe to do that so people can naturally build more physical activity into their daily routines. Yeah. Because that's a big health problem. And so that's sort of my main focus is being a part of the solution to fix our physical inactivity problem.
Cool. And that could be done through that, to the current degree you're working on as you expand out into Parks and Rec and making those spaces available.
Exactly.
I'm going to jump back and reflect real quickly. I am so disappointed. I was never able to be a part of Muckfest. It just happened to coincide. It was I think they were always in the fall, if I'm not mistaken.
It was late summer. When I was on there, they were or August. Yeah, it was kind of that August, September, I think mid-September is actually when they were. Yeah.
And so I've been a part of a community theater for 20 years almost. And we were rehearsing throughout, starting end of July all the way through September, rehearsing our musical, and we would always have rehearsals on the weekends at Muckfest. So I donated, I would join teams and kind of fundraised the first couple of years, but then was never able to actually make it. And I enjoyed those events. I've done the Warrior Dash and maybe one or two others of those type of events. So I was really sad to have missed Muckfest. The second thing
Yeah.
I want to say, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say I was probably the worst person to run that event,
yeah.
or to be involved with it. I think we had an outside partner that actually like organized a lot of it. It was more the relationships. But like the event, I had no interest in climbing through mud. Like put me in a swimming pool, great. I will swim all day. But like climbing through mud, I'm just like, it just isn't what I need to do. So they're like, come on, do it. And I'm like, nope, you guys are good.
I was definitely the fool that was like finding every puddle to splash in when I was running the events. Like, there's another one, splash, splash, splash. And there were people that were running near, or you'd hear them like, oh, why are they splashing? It's like, this is a mud run.
Yeah.
So yes, the second thing, I wish my cat was as friendly when it comes to this. We have a cat, and it's a scaredy. It would never do what your cat is doing, which is getting up. It runs, it's kind of always on a skittish mode. Like, I know I've known you for 10 years, but do I really trust you? You're kind of a cat.
Yeah, that's Fiona. She's super friendly. Her food dish is actually on my desk. We keep it. We have a dog, so we elevate her food, and she decided to finish her breakfast just now. And then
very good. And then the third thing I was going to say, just to what you were saying, I definitely I look for it personally because I know it's, I like to keep active. I'm the kind of person that parks at the back of the parking lot to walk to the store, because why not? Unless I'm maybe in a hurry or something. But for the most part, I'll like just park away and take a stroll, because it's just an easy way to get in a little bit of exercise without thinking about it.
Exactly.
Yep. Exactly. Cool. Well, let's talk about MS, and let's just start with a quick question around when you were diagnosed. So like what point in your life, and what was life like before, and up to the point where you were diagnosed?
Okay, the story. So this is 10 years since I was diagnosed.
Okay.
So I was diagnosed in 2014. So it's kind of that milestone year, I suppose, thinking. What was my life like? It was pretty different. Not because of the MS, just because of life. I had been laid off from my semiconductor job. It's a very cyclical industry, and it wasn't my favorite job in the world. I'll admit that. And so it wasn't that bad. So then I was starting to build up my endurance coaching company. So now I'm like self-employed, trying to make that work. I was in a marriage that wasn't great, and I had some hip issues that required hip surgery. And so like all these things.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it was Super Bowl Sunday in 2014. If you remember, the Broncos played the Seahawks. We all remember that game because it was an awful, awful day for the Broncos.
I traveled to Seattle the next day for work. And so I had to endure everybody at a conference telling me how bad the Broncos played. Yes.
Yeah.
Awful.
Yeah. And so watching that game is when I noticed some eye pain. And so it's like moving from social media was like on fire. So I'm going from the TV back to my phone to my laptop, like trying to keep on top of like what's going on. And I noticed that when I moved my eye, it hurt. I'm like, this is weird, but I kind of blew it off because, it's pain. It'll probably go away. Right. And then over the course of that, like next week, I noticed a change in my color vision in my left eye. And it was just like looking at a screen, and then, sometimes you'll close one eye or close the other one. And then like looking up, like things were just kind of a different color, like just slightly different shades. So I'm like, this is really weird. And I still had that eye pain, and I'm like, it'll go away eventually. And, it kind of didn't. So I was like, all right, if it doesn't go away by like, Saturday, my eye doctor's open on Saturday. So I'm going to go to the bicycle village. I'm going to do the spin class. So I was, training for my triathlons. I'm like, I'm going to do spin class, and then I'll call the eye doctor because she's right around the corner. And that sent me off into like the journey of getting diagnosed.
Yeah.
So,
and so it's interesting because a lot of people have issues with their eyes. I've never heard of a color. Usually it's like, a shortening of vision, or blackening of vision, loss of vision completely. But the color change is definitely an interesting wrinkle that I hadn't heard before. And you a good point. I like to emphasize these things as we go along. It's so common for folks like us who go through this, unless you've had something that's so full blown, which I've talked to people that have, that you just ignore these small symptoms like, oh, it's, it's
Yeah.
probably nothing. Like I said, maybe I strained my eye, or maybe I
Yeah.
overworked my shoulder. This is pretty much, just kind of not a non-issue to start with.
Yeah, exactly. And then like the athlete mindset, we tend to put off pain and kind of ignore it
You
until
bet.
it becomes too bad. You're like, if I just let it rest, maybe
Yep.
it'll go away.
You bet.
Yeah, and so fortunately, it didn't take too long to get diagnosed. Except I did have a second hip surgery, kind of in the middle of everything. So I actually had my brain MRI and a hip MRI in the same week. So
Fun. Yeah.
yeah,
Love the MRI.
that was great. I was like, I know this. Yeah, and then I had to wait like 2 weeks after my hip surgery to get the spinal tap, and that was sort of like the last piece because my MRI wasn't super messy. There were a few lesions, really mostly tiny ones, and one or two that were like, yeah, that's definitely a lesion here, but not like the starburst pattern that some people will see on theirs. And so they're like, we need the confirmation. And so I got that spinal tap, and then it took a while to get that feedback. Wasn't happy with the neurologist I was referred to in that system, so I can gripe about that. And then got the diagnosis in like May of 2014.
So a few months. Did your symptoms get worse, or did they subside in that time period, or what was that like?
It kind of stayed stable. Like the vision slowly improved. They put me on a heavy dose of steroids, probably too late, because it was like 10 days after my initial symptoms, and they put me on a heavy course of steroids. Most of the damage went away. There's still some residual damage. Like I still see slightly differently between my right and left eyes, and if I get too warm, the vision in my left eye and right eye are not quite the same. But it's not enough to interfere daily routine, especially with both eyes.
Another good point you made, just again, love to kind of highlight these. I also, with my diagnosis, didn't connect with the neurologist that gave me the diagnosis. Good dude. I know a ton of people who love him, but just wasn't for me. So it's just, I'd like to point out, it's, always your path and your journey. If you're newly diagnosed and looking at this, don't settle just because the person gave you the diagnosis. If it's not connecting, definitely look for another neurologist that fits your bedside manner, because it's important.
Yeah, and I'll tell that little story because I do think that is important, and kind of how I approached it. And because I was in not a good marriage situation, I didn't have that support. And so I was doing a lot of these things on my own, or grabbed some friends of mine to go to some of the MRI appointments. But most of the main appointments, I was just going by myself. And so that advocate, that asking questions, sometimes it can help to have that extra person there. But so the person who diagnosed me was not a specialist. And so, that's the first thing. I'd highly recommend seeing an MS specialist.
Yeah, there are many out there that are neurologists that are specializing in MS. That's a good, important note for sure.
And the fact that they were looking for the spinal tap results, and they told me to schedule an appointment 2 weeks later. I know labs turn around things way faster than 2 weeks. And so I didn't understand that. And I go in 2 weeks, and then they tell me what it is, which I was pretty sure that that's what they were going to tell me. And it was really, you'll be fine. You'll live a normal life. And I'm like, no, you can't tell me that. I may live a normal life, but it's not normal with a chronic disease, because what goes along with that, all the maintenance and making sure you're taking care of yourself, extra things, all the extra appointments, all the extra bills that you have to pay. It is not a normal life. And so the way they just blew it off, we'll write you a prescription for this drug that's been around forever, and not try to figure out what the best drug for me was. That wasn't good either. And so I just had that nagging, I was going through the things, and okay, you're going to prescribe me this. Okay. And then, yeah, I just had that nagging feeling that something wasn't right. Like, this isn't right. Like, I shouldn't do this. And fortunately, I had an appointment with my primary care person, and I talked to her and I explained everything, got her up to speed with like life. And she was like, I send all my people up to Denver to the Rocky Mountain MS Center. And I was
Yeah,
like,
they're great.
I was like, okay. And I emailed, it was Dr. Corboy.
Yeah.
I emailed him that night. He responded to me that night. He actually replied to his email and said, come see me tomorrow. And they helped me get everything I needed to then go up and see him. And then he sat down with me. He looked at my scans with me, like spent an hour with me and was like, has anybody looked at your scans with you? And I said, no. And he just got this look on his face, like exasperation, like, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then he's like, you have all these options for medications. Let's find what will work best for you and what you want to do. And said, here's all this information. Come back in 3 weeks and we'll do it. I'm like, that's how it was supposed to be. Like that kind of like empower me and help me make that decision. Not just, oh, you'll be fine. Here's a prescription.
Yep. That's an exclamation point on just what we said, 5 minutes ago about, taking control, because if you'd stayed with the other person, who knows the path and journey you might've been on.
Exactly.
It may have been ultimately a lot more difficult and problematic for you. And so, getting that person that works well with you and what you're looking for and your expectations. And what a great point too, just having, another layer of caregiving system around you. Not, luckily, eyes and, a lot of people though, they're working with issues on their, and, cognitive issues. And like you said, you need somebody in the room, maybe that is there for you to advocate, because maybe you're not thinking about questions to ask or maybe even taking in what's being told to you. When I had my first episode, I didn't know anything. Looks like we're having a little bit of an issue.
Yeah.
Got you back, and we're back. I'm not sure what happened there, but all of a sudden we were spinning. I'm in IT. I was talking to my manager, and I'd go back from her office, and I would realize I don't remember anything she said to me. I wasn't taking good notes. My brain was not working well, and that's unusual. So that's how I knew what was going on. I'm gonna ask you. You said it sounded like going into your final, like the you have MS moment, that you kind of already had an inkling. I didn't, but you did. Did you do research? Did you have some idea going into at that point? They were doing MRIs. Obviously, they were thinking along those lines. How would it, even though you kind of knew, how did it impact you when you heard it?
It was, because I'm reading, and so I was like the prime demographic. So I was 38 years old, white female, like European, Eastern European descent. And so I was like, I fit the demographic. I've had, it was the optic neuritis, so it attacked the optic nerve. I thought back to a few years ago prior, when I was riding my bike, and I had some like tingling sensations. Like, you always can look backwards and go, oh, when I felt like that, and I didn't ride my bike for a few months because I thought I had aggravated a nerve, like because my legs felt weird. Like, that was probably it. As well. And so it was just like the chances of it coming back, even though I had, no family history, no nothing, like, it's just sort of an oddball thing. And you're kind of like hoping that it wasn't. You just kind of like, it's probably what it is. Like, it's probably that. The way I took that, it was like, okay, what next? Fortunately, I had a friend through my like triathlon world. He actually like worked at Bicycle Village. He had MS, and he was doing Ironmans. And so I was like, okay, well, Steve can do Ironmans, then I'll be fine.
Yeah.
Like right now, it's just affecting my vision a little bit. And so otherwise I feel okay. And so as long as we can keep that, like, I should be okay. If Steve's doing that, I can do that.
Yeah. That's a powerful statement, because a lot of people I've talked to, they come out of it, and the only person they've known has had more progressive, or the only thing they've seen has been kind of this last set, stage of MS where people are, in wheelchairs or bedridden
Yeah.
and not ambulatory. And so that's where you immediately go. It's like, wow, the only person I know had MS was my great aunt and she died because of it. Is this what I'm facing? I didn't know anybody. So mine was a green field of kind of research and opportunity. I went to the Rocky Mountain MS Center. I didn't end up with Dr. Corboy, but I did go to that center to kind of learn more and meet with a, kind of newly diagnosed, group of folks and kind of got my initial input from that.
Yeah. That's good to do. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, I have this. My biggest concern was really rehabbing from my hip surgery. Like I knew that I was going to have to deal with MS, long term, but my short term was getting my hips recovered so that I can get back. I was a full-time endurance sport coach, at that time. That was I needed to be back moving. And so, I focused on the hip recovery, which maybe took some of the pressure off focusing on what is life going to be like for me now?
Right. Yeah. Interesting kind of side marriage there. And to your point, and kind of back to your, what you're working on in your studies as a PhD candidate, is that just the importance of exercise. I mean, I know that I wasn't doing as endurance sports. I was doing a lot of 5Ks and things and just staying active and working out. Yeah. Right. Okay. No, I never did a triathlon. I've run half marathons. Okay. I ran up Pikes Peak. That's near you. I did the ascent there a couple of years in a row.
Okay.
And that was post MS. So I kind of like you, was I was already thinking and had that mindset around exercise. So my point is getting yourself, around exercise. I would never wish this disease on anybody or any disease on anybody, but boy, I think it really positioned me to better deal with it physically, be able to go back and kind of overcome some of the physical symptoms that I have much quicker than if I hadn't been active and hadn't been already had a mindset around working out, staying active and all those things. It really was having a step up in that process.
Yeah. And I agree with you 100% there. I think the three things somebody with MS needs to pay attention to is nothing fancy. It's no different than the general population. How do you stay healthy? One, you get enough sleep. That's number one. And we don't do that. But if you can live a life where you don't have to set an alarm, that's ideal, right? Get more sleep. Right?
Yeah.
Right. Yep. Number two is watch what you eat. It doesn't have to be a crazy diet. People were sending me all sorts of things. You probably experienced that too. You talk, oh, I read this diet. I read about this diet, right? You get everything from, you get low fat vegetarian diet to high fat.
I only ate carrots for a month.
Diet, right? Right. You get these extremes. I'm well, if one person's recommending low fat vegetarian and another person's recommending high fat paleo, what happens if I meet them in the middle and just eat a well-balanced diet of whole foods, focus on whole foods? Yep. That seems to make most sense. And that's advice for the general population too, right?
Yep. Maybe you might even find you have trigger foods. So keep your own body. You might have things hey, every time I eat this, it does something to my body that makes this symptom. So I mean, every person's different. You find your own path there.
Yeah. And then the third thing is regular exercise. And we call it exercise. And I'm going to change that word. I'm not even going to call it physical activity. I'm going to call it movement.
Yeah.
And just move your body.
Yeah.
However you can, right? It's walking, it's going for a fun bike ride. It's, any kind of lifting heavy things. It doesn't have to, it can be yard work, right? It could be chores. It just move. Don't, get up off the couch. And you were right. Having those habits kind of instilled prior to getting diagnosed just means okay, I just need to make sure I stick with this.
Yeah. It's just kind of picking up that perseverance. It's harder to build it, I think. I've mentioned this before. I'm sure my mom had a lung transplant. Normal life. She wasn't really physically active, but she wasn't a sloth or a couch potato. She worked and she took care of 3 kids and did all those things. But exercise wasn't part of her routine, and having to do exercise just for fun or for purpose. And so when she got her lung transplant, it has been a struggle for her to get that mindset around just what you said, which is just movement. It doesn't mean running around the block for a mile. It could mean just walking back and forth from your back door to your front door, 10 times, whatever your body allows you, whatever the movement you can do. is the movement you should be doing until you'll increase it hopefully and get stronger that way. But doing nothing is definitely can be a problem. It's finding that, that balance for you and your health journey.
Exactly.
For sure.
Yep.
And so, so all this endurance. So you were biking then, obviously, because you're talking about Bike Village. Were you a part of Bike MS before that, or just biking in general, or?
So no, just like cycling the triathlon community but my friend Steve from Bicycle Village had a Bike MS team.
Okay.
And so I knew about it. I knew about the event, but I could never do it because there's a triathlon in Loveland that happens the same weekend, or used to, as Bike MS weekend. And so I was involved actually with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. And that was one of our events that we did. So I was like the triathlon coach for team and training. And so this race took precedence over any other things that I wanted to do. And then, so it happened to be the year that I was diagnosed, I called up the society because I knew about the event. Couldn't race that event. We weren't doing it as a team and training event that year. I think we had stopped that. But I had an athlete that I was coaching who had a shoulder injury and couldn't swim in the race. And so I said, I will swim for you. Let's do it as a relay. Let's talk to the race director. We'll switch over to a relay. I'll do the swim, and then you can do the bike and run. And then I'm in Loveland anyway. And so then I'll just go and volunteer at Bike MS for the weekend. And so that's what I did. It was, cool. 2014. I swam in the Loveland Lake to Lake, and then drove up to Fort Collins and volunteered at the team village, and then was on course the next day. And that was sort of my first actual experience with Bike MS and what it was.
And so how long before you started your own Bike MS team? Because you started Team Neo, if I'm not correct, right?
Yeah. So the next year, so it wasn't long. It was wow, this really is a great event. I've heard good things about it, and it truly is a great event. And I was writing for this website called 303 Triathlon, and they have a branch called 303 Cycling. They're now 303 Endurance, but they post about the Colorado endurance sports scene. And I was working for them because as a side gig. And they would do a charity ride every year. And so I talked to them and I'm like, hey, you do Bike MS, I'll be the team captain. And they're like, sure. And so I had team 303 for the 2015 Bike MS Colorado. Okay. And so that was my first team captain experience. And then that was the next year was Team Neo started.
Right on. So you guys have been doing it for this 8 years, 8 years.
So this was my 10th
year
ride, my 9th with Team Neo. So next year will be my 10th Team Neo. So it's my 11th Bike MS event was this year wise, because year 0 the volunteer year, which is number 1. So 11 years, 10 years as a team captain, and including the COVID years. And then 9. So next year is the 10-year anniversary for Team Neo.
That was an interesting year. I could just taken over as captain of our team. We have a kind of a spread system for Team Coneheads where multiple people kind of take on roles to keep it balanced, and in that way when somebody's burning out, the next person steps up, and we've been able to hopefully keep it going, and we'll keep it going that way. I took over just before COVID and kind of navigated us through that year. We ended up doing 2-day ride, 150 miles, pretty much the full team.
Nice.
Joined us, kept it socially distanced, and had an outdoor kind of, party at the end of day 1 at a park. So it worked out really well. We didn't drop much in fundraising, which was great. That was our main goal, was hey, we want to honor our donors. And so to do that, we've got to ride 2 days was the feeling. And we're going to continue to fundraise strong, even though it was a weird year to do it with people, not working. And there's a sensitivity around that. We talked a lot about how to approach fundraising and just, came at a pretty good conclusion on how we'd handle it. And we're pretty, happy with the results and happy that everything kind of is starting to get back to, pre-pandemic levels with the bike ride and the fundraising and such.
Yep. Yeah, we did a 1 day ride. I created some different routes for people who wanted to do like 30 or 50. We had a 75-mile route and then 100. I think I did map a 100-mile route for people who
Nice.
wanted to do that. I had one person take that. I'm like, no, 75 is good. I haven't been riding.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think we did a 100-mile route. We kept it to, I think we did 75. I don't even think we did have like a B team 30-mile route, because the day one we did kind of a round, like a city loop, just to make it easy for everybody to attend and do, and didn't want to make it too difficult. Day two, we did a northern route, which was a little bit more strenuous and challenging, and had a drop off in folks doing day two, but had most of the team on day one, which was great. Yeah. And like I
Nice.
said, we have some hardcore riders who will ride. And we have one guy who's it's not uncommon for him to ride like 140 miles on day one. He'll do the 120-mile loop and then do another 20 when he gets back, or start the next day looping Fort Collins a couple times to get 100 in the next day. He's just a beast of a rider and loves to do it. So
good on him.
Yeah, that's what I say. I'm like, good on you, friend. I'm gonna stick to the to the normal routes and muddle through. You were 102B this year. Did you see 102A or 102?
I did. I came across 102A by the second rest stop.
Okay.
And so I want to say her name was Kim. It was a K last name. Yep. I know that, and so that's why she had the A. Okay. Or like I looked at the fundraising and it wasn't exactly matched. They just picked people who were fairly close together.
Gotcha. Okay, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like within cents or within dollars?
Within dollars. Okay. Yeah.
Fun. Yeah. No, we had somebody on our team who was also a 10 something A. I think he was in a group that was like A, B, and C even. Like wow. he might have been C. And I was like, wow, they've stretched it out this year for wanted to get people up and suck them up into those fundraising buckets, so you can say I was in top 50, get more people in 50. The 150, get them excited. Right. Yeah. I like it. Yeah. Yeah. Good way to go about it. So just jumping back to the eyes, what other symptoms I don't know if we talked about it, but so you had the eye issue. Did you ever have any further episodes that created, further symptoms and further issues for you?
No, fortunately not. And so it's really just like the vision thing. And then just like those tingling sensation in my legs. And there's a few like minor things and you're like, oh, is that MS? Probably, but it's, just, you're like, it's a niggle, it falls in that like niggle realm. And you're just like, and sometimes it's like, I have to listen to my body sometimes, but I can push pretty hard. And don't have fortunately, like don't have the fatigue that some people get. Like I've never been where I've like, just by living a day, the next day being wiped out. Like, I can push my body. In 2016, so that's like 2 years after being diagnosed, I went out to the Badwater 135 race and crewed.
I've never heard of that.
Okay. Google it, Badwater 135. It's actually taking place this weekend. Okay. It's like the full moon in July is when they run it. And it starts at Badwater Basin out in California, and it ends on the Mount Whitney portal. And so it's 135 ultra run. And somebody that I was coaching was not running it, but like was doing some of the other Badwater races, and got to know somebody who was then running the 135. And so we went out to crew her and do that 135. And so actually I had broken my elbow a few weeks prior at Bike MS.
Oh no.
Yeah, I kind of I crashed. It was my fault. Like my front wheel hit something and I just tipped right over. And so I go to Badwater 135, 2 weeks after Bike MS or whatever, having surgery. My arm's in a sling because I had a plate put in it. And it's ridiculously hot. It's 115 degrees at like the Badwater station, right? It's that's hot. 200 feet below sea level. Like it is in July. Yeah. Super, super hot. And then when you're crewing, there were 3 of us crewing one runner. You got to get her through. There's no napping. Right. There's no rest, right? You can kind of relax a little bit.
And that person's running 135 miles nonstop.
Yeah, she
Yeah.
took like a little break here and there. Maybe we like, no, you need to eat this pizza. Like
Right.
you don't want to eat, but like eat this pizza, like this whole
Yeah.
thing, and then take a nap in the car
Yeah.
where you can have a little bit of air conditioning, and then you'll keep going,
Yeah.
like that kind of thing.
Gotcha.
So yeah, it was like 60 hours because it started at like 9 p.m. And so then
Okay.
you're just up all night, all the way through the next day.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
I've never fallen asleep so fast in my entire life that I can remember. Like once it
After
was
that
all
event.
done. Yeah, I got hit the like soon as my head hit the hotel bed, like I was out. But I was
Yeah.
like, well, if I can handle 115-degree heat and like be up for 60 hours and like, and deal with that, like
Yeah.
I think I'm okay. Like I still
Yeah.
have to be careful. That's certainly extreme, but that
Yeah.
was my like, I guess I'm all right.
Yeah. No, I mean, this interesting thing about MS obviously is that everybody's different. Everybody's journey is
Yeah.
different, where your lesions are. Even when, like, my neurologist, was always amazed at where my lesions are, that I don't have more symptoms. It's like, basically you got a pretty classic, like you said, star pattern in your brain and spinal cord. And I would expect you not to be quite as ambulatory. He was always
Mhm.
interested in that aspect, and perhaps some, again, back to what we were talking about, it perhaps some correlation between my body physiology and exercise that I was already doing.
Mhm.
Did that have any impact somehow to these lesions being
Yeah.
where they are, and me not being as affected as maybe I could be? Um, so yeah,
Yeah.
no, interesting to
That's
hear.
great.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think it's that like like keeping your mind active too. Like you keep your body active and your mind. So like
Yeah.
the theory of like you have that roadblock, and so your brain just figures out a detour. Like
Yeah.
it figures out how to get around it, and so
Yeah.
like as long as you can keep getting around it, like you're good. It's like
Yeah.
yeah.
Anything else top of mind for you as far as your MS journey that we haven't talked about that you feel is, worth sharing, that people might be interested in?
I'll share a little bit about like moving to a different place because
Yeah.
I'm in Colorado Springs right now. I'm home for the summer, but I am a North Carolina resident right now because I have to be a
Yeah.
student at NC State University. Um, and so when you go to another place like that, like I have health insurance through the university, but it means I also had to find like top-notch care.
Yeah.
And so, when I talked to my doctor here, he didn't really know too many people in that area, but fortunately, Duke University is, 30 miles away
Yeah.
and they have an MS center. And
Oh,
this is
cool.
just like the small world story. So I go into campus health just for normal, like meet a new provider, just to take care of normal things. So I go, and it's like classes haven't even started. It's like, August of 2022. And I make a random appointment with somebody who just has an 8 a.m. appointment available. Like I
Okay. Right.
expected, you have an appointment, I'm going to go see you. Like that's all. Cause like, I just need like blood pressure meds refilled. No big
Right.
deal.
Right.
Right. And so I go in and I'm talking with her to like establish care and also like to figure out how to get a referral to like, I was looking at Duke. And so like, how do I navigate that? Can she help? And she's like, my husband has MS. And I was like, how did this happen?
Yeah.
So
Wow.
like, so immediately I was like, you understand everything. And so you can tell me like, yes, we like Duke. We like this guy at Duke. Like, and so she's helped me get an appointment there so I could establish care there. But like work your networks if you can when if you're moving to a new place to find like the right doctor.
Yeah.
And fortunately for me, like my MS is stable. So like I really go in and they do, they look at me and they do the standard neurological tests and
Yeah.
any issues. I'm like, no, not really. Like good to
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's definitely easy. I think if you have more things that need to be managed, it's could be a little bit more complicated to find the right person, but
Yeah.
fortunately, like that worked out really well for me, and I'm happy for that.
I mean, yeah, what an interesting, like you said, what an interesting turn of events to find somebody just from a general practice that has that knowledge around MS and was able to
Yeah,
provide, a good referral to you.
yeah,
My daughter has celiac, and we didn't know. I mean, she just, as a young kid was complaining about stomach, and, didn't really click, but we had to shift insurance and ended up at Kaiser for a little bit. And the first appointment happened to be with a general practitioner whose sister had celiac. And so on that very first appointment going, he's like, hey, she's had kind of chronic stomach issues for the last year. Haven't really found anything. And she's like, it could be celiac. We should test. And so like within a second, boom, she's like, yeah, she definitely has celiac. And so, was able to shift that off. And so, yeah, sometimes it just takes that kind of happenstance moment so always, again, to your point, always keep pushing the narrative when you know something's wrong and you know your body. If you're not finding the right person who's meeting your needs, to get you the answers you need, like to your point earlier with the first neurologist you had, keep pushing that and use your network. I mean, great tips, MS Society has the Navigator, which is a great program that you can dial them up for free. And this is a prime example of how they might be able to help you to talk about, hey, yeah, we can point you to some resources to help you get established at a new, if you're traveling, or relocating, whatever it is, that's what they're there for.
Yeah, they're great. I haven't used them, but because I worked for the society, I became very familiar with the services that they have. And I got lucky, I suppose, my own way, is that I ended up getting divorced, shortly after I was diagnosed, and kind of reestablished my life. And then I remarried, and he happens to be a PA in family medicine, but he's now that when he sees people and they come in and they have like either MS symptoms or have been diagnosed with MS, like he can offer them that reassurance because like he understands. And I also have that like, hey, listen to your body person, like it's okay if you like rest today. I'm like, I'm not like, I was like, rest.
It took me a while to get to that point for sure. And, I would say even the last couple of years to a really level of comfort of like, I've got a pretty good handle as a puppet master on my own, activity and body, and being comfortable, saying, nope, I go to sleep at 9, because if I don't go to sleep at 9, I don't do well the next day. And sometimes what's weird, I just had, you mentioned this, like just for out of the blue, no reason. I had an event on Monday. It was at Top Golf. I barely swung a golf club. I maybe played one round. So it's like maybe swung 5 or 10 times, whatever, like 10 times I swung the club. Didn't do anything else. Didn't drink anything. Got home, went to bed normal, woke up on Tuesday like I was, like I'd worked out, all day. It was the strangest thing. I was like, wow, this just, usually I could point to something like, hey, I just did a 150-mile bike ride. Yeah, I should be, decimated for the next 2 or 3 days. I kind of expect that. I know that going in. This one hit me. I was like, I didn't even do anything. This is just, this is just a weird, unfortunate coincidence that I just happened to have a bad day. And I have grace in that now. Normally I'd be like, why am I tired? Why? It's like, okay, yeah, I know why.
And now I'm trying to like balance, like what's normal aging. Like I'm,
that. Yeah, awesome.
Like
I'm right
losing strength on the bike. I go, that's just because I'm getting older. Like,
my neurologist will say like in the last 5 years, I'm 55. So in the last 5 years, it's kind of been that narrative like, oh, well, it could be MS, or you're getting old. So it could be that too, as I'd say, I'm feeling this. He's like, yeah, that, that could be some different MS things, or it could just be aging. So there's always that new wrinkle, for sure. No pun intended. Cool. Well, I really appreciate the conversation. I've got a couple questions for you, just the end, just kind of some fun stuff.
Sure.
I'm calling it time to unclip. That's the new segment.
Awesome.
As we head out, time to unclip. Yeah, that's somebody suggested I need to find a name. I think I'm going to settle on that. I just thought of this one because you're in North Carolina. My company is located in Ohio and Dayton. What's your feeling on the Wright brothers? Do they belong to North Carolina or Ohio?
Oh,
do you know?
I think so. I actually visited the Wright brothers exhibit memorial this past spring. I went out there, and amazing. If you can get to Kitty Hawk, like totally go.
I grew up on the East Coast. I grew up in Falls Church, Virginia. So I went to like Outer Banks all the time and drove through there. So I've seen Kitty Hawk. It's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I stayed in Kill Devil Hills, and I was like, oh, beautiful. This is there. I have to go. And so I went. So I would say it's like both, right?
Yeah.
Like their first flight took place in North Carolina. So I think North Carolina has a very valid claim to like what their license plate says, first in flight, because you can see where they took it. They have it. They have the markers of that first flight and how far it went. but it's obviously like the bicycle business in Ohio that
Yep.
kept them going. So,
Yep.
so I think there's a fair way to share.
I believe so too. Yeah, my boss is a huge. When he settled from Moldova, his sponsors lived in Dayton. That's how he got there, and he stayed there and loves it. He would probably argue otherwise, but I'm with you. I'm more of a centrist, and yeah, I think we can share the Wright brothers across different multiple spots in history.
Yep.
Okay, it could be a weird question. Today is National Hot Dog Day. Is hot dog a sandwich?
Is hot dog a sandwich?
Or I would say, is it food? You might say it's not even food at the end of the day, depending on your feelings on hot dogs.
No, it's food. You have to go kosher beef, right? The only real hot dog is a kosher beef hot dog.
Yeah.
So
yeah, Hebrew National is my favorite. One of my favorites.
Yeah. So I wouldn't call it a sandwich. You could probably argue that it's because it's a bun, not 2 slices of bread, and that's what I'll stick with. And they're really funny. I need to get there. Down the street from me in North Carolina, there's this place called the Roast Grill. And it's a little tiny like counter service. It's been there since the late 40s, maybe 50s, a long time. So it's like a classic. And it's just got this old like sign that says hot wieners. And I just walked by it and I was like, what is this place? And I'm like, oh, okay. And then, they're only open like from 11 to 3, like 4 or 5
when they
days
run out
a
of
week.
hot dogs, they cook them and they run out.
Right. Like they serve like hot dogs and baklava. Like
I love it. What a strange combo.
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah. Have you ever been there's a spot in Sedalia called Bud's Bar. Have you ever been down there?
I've been
for you up there.
Sedalia. I've done rides and training stuff in Sedalia, but I can't say that I've been to that.
Yeah, they just funny because they serve hamburgers or cheeseburgers and chips, and that's it. So they'll tell you, we don't have salad, we don't have fries, onion rings. It's it. We have cheeseburgers and chips, and that's what you order, right? Just a cheeseburger or a hamburger or a double. You get a double.
There you go. Do one thing, do it well.
Exactly. Do one thing and do it well. Yep. Yes, I was going to say something about the. I saw the sign you posted at some point. It said a fresh cron. I love that. You stopped for that. That's definitely the kind of thing I would do. And you see weird things like that. Yeah, I have to stop and I think I've got to take a picture of.
Saw that. That was one of my family members because the joke is somebody spelled corn wrong or
yes. It felt very sci-fi. I felt like I was going to see some villain from a Star Trek episode standing there like, it is I, Kron.
Yeah.
But I'm sweet, but I'm Kron.
That's like a family joke. So I got tagged in that photo.
That's funny. Yep. Last question. I'm going to say I think I know the answer, but I'll ask you: do you prefer climbing a hill or flying down a hill?
I prefer climbing the hill.
All right, I'm going to guess you for based on the broken bones and the endurance, flying down a hill. But
no, I prefer like to come out safe, and so flying down a hill is a little too. Like there's an amount of speed I'm willing to take, but like I love the climb and I love a steady, not super steep, but just a steady climb because I'll drop you.
Yep. That used to be me because of my body type. I'm smaller, strong legs, and so I could even my bigger friends I could out climb them all the time because they were struggling to get up the hill, and I was just like zipping. And then but downhill I'm definitely on the brakes, and they weigh twice me, and so they're and they're not afraid, so they're flying by me on the downs, for sure.
With traffic these days, it's not worth flying.
I'm on a little teeny tin piece of metal going 30 miles an hour is enough. That's about my limit. They're like, oh, I got up to 59. It's like I don't want to hear that's crazy.
I'll get 40. I'll hit like 35, 40. Like if it's straight, like not if it's curvy, but if it's straight,
I might be okay if it was straight, like in a really nicely paved road, like coming off a Lookout Mountain. If you've done that ride, and if you go down the backside of Colfax, there's that really straight stretch where you can it's just pretty straight for a long, bit there.
Yeah.
And I kind of okay with that, but if there's going to be curves involved and there's like a little, pebble in the road, I'm getting a little dicey.
Yeah, and if I don't know the road, like for a few times, like I won't descend fast because you never know in the pothole. Like you can't tell them from a shadow.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
And that'll take you out. We've seen it happen, of course. Like you sit out on the road, you've crashed. I've crashed. I caught a crack in the road and hit a street sign. I think it was my first bike MS in Colorado.
Oof.
So yeah, fun stuff. Well, I appreciate having you on. So
Yeah.
happy to hear your story and to have you share it with us and the world, or my
Yeah.
listeners, my mom, of course, my one listener out there. Thank you for listening, Mom, and watching. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you again on the road. I don't know if you come up and do any other events up here, or I'm still interested if you have. I'm sure you've done it. I haven't done the Manitou Incline yet, and I'm still looking to find an
Oh, okay.
opportunity to do that guy.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've done it,
Yeah.
but I did Bar Trail up to Bar Camp a few weeks ago. So
Oh,
we
did you?
hit the
Yep.
incline traffic. Yeah. And I'll be doing Bike MS New Bern in
Okay. Yeah, I
early
was going to ask about that
September.
if you're doing the North Carolina
Yeah.
one. Yeah, they have
Yeah,
two or.
last year I did the tour to Tanglewood last year, and
Mhm.
this year I'm going to do New Bern, so I'll be able
Nice.
to say I've done them both.
I did the Colonial Crossroads in Virginia this year, which was a new one for me. I started my Bike MS in Virginia, so I don't know what they used to call it, but it was something in Middleburg. It maybe had wine in the title because it's Virginia's wine country out there,
Okay.
really rolly
Nice.
hills. I've done a few in Maryland.
Nice.
The Chesapeake one, I've done that one before, and then I'm going to do New York later this year. The one in Manhattan.
Oh, fantastic. When is that?
It's like October, like mid-October, somewhere in that
Okay.
range. Yeah.
That timing might be bad.
Yep.
But yeah, that would be cool.
It looks like a fun
I've
one. Yeah.
done Waves to Wine, so the San Francisco one. I did the
Mhm.
Century on day one. That was hard as all get out.
Yeah.
That was way harder than the Colorado ride. Even.
Yeah. Really.
And then I've done Wyoming. Yeah, San Francisco hills are like
Yeah. Yeah. You're right.
unrelenting, just steep.
Yeah.
Like it took me forever to do the first 15 miles. Like I'm like, am I ever gonna get out of town? Like this
Yeah.
is crazy.
It's like the W's and on Bar Trail. Like that first bit of
Yeah.
Bar Trail is like the hardest part. Like getting past that
Yeah.
W is like the killer,
Yeah.
climb,
It
and
was
then
like,
it's all
oh
steady after that.
yeah. So anyway, yeah, Waves to Wine was a good one. And then Wyoming that don't have anymore, but that was
Yeah,
I've done that one a couple times.
that one never worked out either. I think for the same reason. I think it was usually in like August.
Yep, that
Time
was
frame.
August ride.
And it just didn't work out because I was always doing something else, so I didn't get to do that one before it closed down. Yep. But yeah, I'm trying to stretch out, use my passport, and get around and do a few more of these fun,
Nice.
passport rides. Yeah.
Excellent.
Cool. Well, again, thank you so much, and
Yeah, thank you.
yeah, look forward to seeing you around the MS world here.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Bobby. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Yeah. All right.